Hello. It's about 5 trillion% humidity today and quite warm, and we're having intermittent summer storms. So I decided instead of risking continuing to be outside and getting rained on again, I'll just talk about books because it's the next best thing. Today I wanted to talk about um, A Witch Alone by Marian Green. Marian Green? I don't know. I'm not very good at saying people's names. It's subtitled 13 Moons to Master Natural Magic. This is a really interesting book, and it's a book that I don't often see recommended or listed in reading lists for witches or pagans, which is kind of a shame because I feel like it's quite a good book. Um, I had never heard of it, but there used to be this really amazing secondhand bookstore in a nearby suburb, and it was just crammed with books. So you'd go in and you could spend a whole day there and not see everything. And some days you would just find stuff. And this was one of those things. I saw it. I have this habit of, if I'm in a particular mood, I will just buy any book that catches my attention. I have a thing for books. Some of my friends call it a problem. I think it's a decent problem to have. Anyway, so I bought this book and I took it home amongst other books and sort of gave it a bit of a flick through and wasn't hugely impressed to start. I was just kind of like, meh, whatever. And I just kind of put it aside and didn't look at it again for quite a while. And then maybe a year later, I gave it a proper look, and I seriously wish that I had had the maturity to actually properly look at this book when I was younger. I also really wish that this book was available when I was a teenager. Well, I mean, it was available, but I wish that I had got my hands on it when I was a teenager. This book, it's designed for, it's essentially a personal study course for someone who is operating on their own. So it takes place over 13 moons. So you've got a chapter for each of the moon cycles, and each chapter deals with a particular topic and gives you an exercise or a series of exercises to complete, to action and further deepen your understanding of the topic, as well as recommended reading to get other perspectives on the topic. I just think it's a really awesome book. I think it's really well structured, and I really like the idea of doing a 13-month long reading, like a book club thing with it, and actually going through a chapter each month with a group and reading the suggested reading materials and doing the exercises and discussing what we find. I just feel like it's a really cool system for developing a practice and an understanding and a body of knowledge. I think one of the things that I really really like about Marian Green's Marian I'm just going to say Marian Green's book is that it's not based strictly in any tradition. So she references multiple traditions and says, these people do this, these people do that. If you're just doing stuff on your own, you don't really need to worry about it. But it's good to know. And her process for learning is based very strongly in observation of your surroundings and interactions with things that are happening in the world around you. So, like the first chapter is literally about... Wait, I've gone too far. So it's things like... oh gosh. Where are the things? So she talks about things like how, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head because I can't find it in the book. But is it Marie Laveau, and she ran the hairdressing salon and got gossip from the town and sort of used that to extend her influence and better serve people or clients of hers who came to her for magic. Yeah, and so it's things like, research comparative religion and take notes. I mean, the fact that she talks about actually taking notes is, I mean, none of this, oh, it's all about what you feel in the moment. She's like, well, what do you feel in the moment? Take note of that. Are there any patterns that emerge in this? She's actually got a kind of analytical approach to feelings, which is rare in pagan circles, I think. But so things like this, where is your nearest flowing water, be it stream, river, or even the sea? What do you know about the tides and their relationship to the moon? Become curious about everything, for that was all. For that was certainly one of the assets of every traditional witch. Seek to know about your community, its needs, its desires, its good and bad points, and above all, seek out your local magical spots. So she's got this really interesting blend of kind of Wicca influenced things with a kind of traditional witch mentality, and that kind of still operating in the idea of, the village wise person, but instead of just using it as this quaint, I mean, very romanticized notion of what, likely never existed in history. She's actually talking about what that means, and things that you can do to fill that role, and being observant and actually paying attention to what's around you, and learning about, the tides, right? Like, I've lived next to the ocean pretty much my whole life, and I mean, I intuitively know what's safe and what isn't, and I can pick out like rip tides and stuff, but, well, we just call them rips, but yeah. But I couldn't tell you the science behind that, or the actual mechanics, and the idea of actually going out and getting a book and looking at the science of the moon phases, right? Like, I don't think I've ever seen a witchcraft book tell anyone to do that, and I think that's fascinating. I mean, yeah, I just think, and above that, she's got a really nice tone, I think. She doesn't speak to you like you're a complete moron, she's not condescending. She's also very clear to point out what is her opinion, and what she's observed in other people or other traditions, and is very open to the reality of a solitary practitioner having to pick things out. I think this is kind of the book that Scott Cunningham wanted to write. It is still very based in that god-goddess cycle kind of idea. She does talk about, the Wheel of the Year, but she does reference the Christian traditions, which I think is really cool. And she also talks about how to find value in places of power marked out by churches and stuff. I think that's much more relevant in Europe than it is in Australia, because, our churches aren't that old, and there were no pagan centers before the churches. I mean, there was the Aboriginal stuff, but we're not really. It's got nothing to do with me. I think that would be rude. So yeah, it's a really interesting book. I think sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to stomach that kind of the whole notion of. I mean, it can be very flowery, like her poetry and stuff. But I think the core of what she's saying and the exercises she provides and the framework for study that she gives you in this book is absolutely incredible. And I think that anyone can take this book and follow it through over 13 months and come up with a very profound and informed and personally significant and meaningful practice. And I think that's really great. I think this is definitely one of those books that people should work. And I think, like I said, I really wish that this had been the first book that I had been given and that I had had the maturity to actually work it instead of chucking it away because it was too new agey or whatever. I mean, it's not new agey. It's actually, anyway, you know what I mean. It sounded too much like Wicca when I first read it, which is why I was a bit skeptical. And I mean, not the interesting sort of Wicca either. It's like the God. As soon as I hear God and Goddess, I'm like, bah. This book is worth a read. I highly recommend if you can stomach poems to the God and Goddess. And I mean, she actually quotes Valiente. Another real credit to this author. She actually gives credit where credit is due, and I think that is far too rare in pagan authoring. And also her sections on plants are not stupid and fanciful. They're actually, oh, here comes the storm again. I got really still. Yeah, I just think this is a really good book. And, if anyone wants to do a book club with me and work through it, hit me up. Anyway, that was me rambling about A Witch Alone by, how did I say I was going to say it? Marion Green. I hope that was somewhat informative for you. Let me know if you've read the book or if you have any other beginner books. As in, like, one final note, I think this book also is incredibly suitable for anyone wishing to go into any direction of witchcraft. Like, if you want to be a traditional witch, this will work. If you want to go into Wicca later on, this will work. Like, it's just a good book, guys. It's a good book, and I really regret to say that I haven't worked through it as thoroughly as I would like. Anyway, I'm going to stop now because this is nearly 13 minutes long. All right, bye.